and welcome back to another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. It has been a very, very long time. In the last 7 years of recording the podcast, I've taken one break, one extended break, and that was to work really full time for the Weightlifting House podcast and kind of divert my efforts to that. Since I think I maybe have taken a week or a couple weeks here and there. But it's been 2 months. It's been 2 months, and I remember I would think about not doing the podcast, and I get really anxious. Like, oh man, I can't. Like, I have to put out episodes. I've got to have that like constant stream of content and interaction with the space, and then you actually get swept away by all the responsibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, just whatever you're involved with, and the next thing it's been 2 months, and you have Max Aita on the other side, and you're recording a welcome back show. So Max, I'm very pleased to have you join me.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to be here. I'm pretty excited. I think this is gonna be pretty cool. Can you hear me okay? I feel like
Yeah,
my
everything sounds
mic
good on
is
your end.
okay. Yeah, I'm excited to do this again. I think we both kind of get into that spot where we were trying to record a lot of content, trying to do a bunch of stuff, and then ultimately, like, life gets in the way, or projects or work or whatever. And so despite this being our profession, it's like still hard to like muster up all that, um, stuff to do.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
it's it, it's definitely it can definitely be a challenge, but I think it's almost nice to get a little bit of a break because I feel a little bit energized and excited, especially given the state of CoachLogik and the coaching platform, which actually I don't know if this is gonna burst the surprise bubble, but it's basically open for anyone who wants to use the beta version of the app. So you can go to
yeah,
coachlogik.com, you can sign up, and you can literally start the beta version today. Is that right?
yeah. If you want to just go directly to log in to sign up, go to app.coachlogic.com. If you go to coachlogic.com, it's just our landing page, but you can get there as well. But go to app.coachlogic.com, and literally you can just make an account and start coaching people.
Wow, for
Yeah,
free.
for free right now. Yeah, we're gonna have a freemium version, so it'll be like up to, I think we're gonna do up to 3 athletes will be free. So if you're just coaching 3 people, it's free. Obviously, the exchange there is that we collect some data on videos of lifts and whatnot, and we can train models if we need. But also, because part of our mission is to bring more coaches in, I would say there's like the person who's coaching 1 to 3 athletes maybe is doing it very much as a favor to their friends or whatever. But you start getting in a few more athletes and you can turn it into a profession. You can turn it, make money at it. So I like the idea that there's a freemium to 3. If you can get convinced to pick up a couple more people, then, we'll charge you as a business. But the goal there is like enticing software, really capable software that'll help you do a great job with people, and then you might find you like coaching and pursue it more.
Yeah, and that CoachLogik obviously developed by the sharpest minds. I want to say in weightlifting, but Kush has a sharper mind than just in weightlifting. I would say he's like just one of the most brilliant guys. I mean, I'm sure you've met. I've talked to him a little bit, and then yourself. So the one of the sharpest minds in weightlifting has created this product basically to coach athletes on, and I've been using it since. Well, basically, since you're like, hey, you can jump on now. You sent me a link. You're like, yeah, put a few people on. I put literally everybody I coached on the platform.
Yeah.
I've been using it in bulk, in mass, since, and it's been great. And I think the awesome thing about using it immediately, and we'll get to the topics. We have some really cool topics, like basically kind of like the Chat GPT for program writing, or for set rep prescription. We want to kind of talk about
Yep.
something like that. Definitely want to talk about how our coaching's been going, recent successes, case studies, and stuff. So I'm just going to kind of make a few more comments about CoachLogik because it
Yep.
really is revolutionary. But yeah, I've been using it since, and I think when you get on it early, it's not like, oh, I'm going to wait until it's ready. It's I get on it early so I can get my process down. So
Yeah.
as features start coming in, I don't have to learn everything all at once. I can kind of like, oh, I can see how this fits into my flow. I can see how this fits into my flow. You want to be an early adopter. You don't want to wait, because when you wait, you get left behind. And in the sport of weightlifting, being left behind means maybe a smaller PR, maybe going 4 for 6, 3 for 6. Like, those are things you don't want as a weightlifting coach. So I would implore people to sign up and start using it today. I think it's,
Yeah.
it's the best thing since sliced bread if you're a carbivore. If you're not, maybe it's, sliced ribeyes or something.
I want to just mention one thing because you talk about it, and we'll talk about this probably as we go. But like getting in, or like, don't worry about when you start using it, because you could probably attest right now to how much has changed since the first day you logged in, and there are so many. There's hundreds of little things we have in the pipeline that, Kush. We have another developer named Michael, and a friend of ours who is a lifter and coach named Dino, who are all working on this. So there's always new stuff happening. It's popping in. Like it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super exciting stuff. And before we get into some of the really cool features of that, and just talk weightlifting in general, programming, coaching, maybe we could do some updates. Maybe we do a couple of case studies and just talk about recent coaching
Yeah.
epiphanies, changes to our coaching, things that we've liked, things that we've maybe shied away from. I know specifically thinking more in terms of developing the squat. And if we want to talk powerlifting, we
Yeah.
had USA Powerlifting Nationals recently, and I was talking to you about Danny's squats and how we can kind of get those moving again, improve the quality, kind of drive numbers up, and just to kind of describe how she squats. And you've seen her, tends to likes to high bar, tends to really operate well when she can stay upright and kind of keep that like brace, keep her midsection tight, um, but kind of shifts around a little bit. Her hips might roll around a little bit, she might tip, and then she kind of compensates by rounding over and kind of shoving her hips under her shoulders. So you watch and you're like, hey, here are the adjustments that I would make. um, and I would say for anyone who struggles with a squat, to stay upright, to hold a good brace, hold good position, and to be able to kind of drive through the middle when you're going to get stuck or you're going to lose balance. A few changes I've incorporated since would be safety bar squats, but I
Okay.
put a tempo in. And that's like the first day I gave her that, not only was she just so uncomfortable with the safety bar, but that tempo is just so distorted. And I think that's going to be great for more and better control,
Mm-hmm.
and then for kind of trying to resist that little sway and tip you're going to get with that bar. So I put those in, and then we've been doing like a wider stance, kind of like just slightly outside of, to kind of break the monotony of a competition stance. And then we've been doing a box squat, which is really just a reference point, and it's control to the box, light touch, and pop back up. And that's been great too, because it's super uncomfortable, super awkward. So I think when you have that noise in the system, you have to try to recalibrate to figure out how to move correctly and successfully and become more efficient. So I think like those variations are ones I'm leaning on. And we're just going to focus on quality of work and amount of work, not really load as much. It's like a
Yeah.
secondary progression. So those were
I
a
like
few of
that.
the changes I've incorporated. I don't know if you have any thoughts before we kind of dig in any more.
No, I think those are really good. Yeah. I mean, I want to point out, I think you probably are the one that suggested with Tiff, Tiny Tiff. Um, Tiff's got an issue with her squat where she'll like, she has no boundaries around depth. Like she'll either be like too high or try to bounce like a weightlifting squat, and neither one works. Um, but you suggested having her squat to a box, not box squat, but like just touch a box. And it's so funny. I never even thought of that, but I know you, because you mentioned box squats. I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, what a great way to use it, because for her, it would like, probably similar to Danny, but like it would just give you perfect depth every time. And I'm thinking probably along the lines of you, what you're going to do is just sitting and touching the box and coming back up so that every rep is identical as far as depth goes. and it would build a lot of that comfort in that position and just like familiarity with where you're going to be. Um, so yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like incorporating box squats or squats to a box, whatever we're going to call it, into it.
Well, and I think as a coach, and a trap you can fall into when you get into the sport and you're like, yeah, I think that's a dumb idea and I know why, and I'm going to tell you, is you really have this like really singular understanding of why something would be useful. So if you say a box squat, it's like, no, that's a West Side thing, and they
Yeah,
do it because of X, Y, and Z reason, because they're squatting in suits and they're trying to mimic that same movement, or they're trying to
sure.
mimic the qualities of the suit, or to minimize the support of the suit. Instead, it's like, oh, when you squat to a box, you have to find the right position. You have to slow down. So it's taking that and in a high school setting with kids who are squatting, and a lot of kids. I'll be in there with a freshman football team, and it's 20, 25, 30 kids all at once who are 14 years old and just like no sense of what's going on. You get a med ball, you put it right under their hips, and you say you're going to squat to that med ball every rep, and suddenly suddenly you see like their perception of what's going on kind of fracture, and it's like, oh, I can squat correctly, I just have to
Yeah,
like have a target. So
totally.
I think as a coach, when your repertoire kind of grows, it's not so much it grows in the sense of I have more tools, it's just I have more utility for the same tools, and I know how to emphasize certain aspects. Because at the end of the day, if you do a pin squat and you're on it for 1 second or 2 seconds, yeah, there's like you diminish the amount of like kind of like stretch reflex, but I don't know what that's really going to do. But if you say you have to control it, you have to find the right position, you have to be in a good position out of the bottom, it's like, okay, there's like a skill acquisition component and a positional component.
Totally.
um, and then you talked a bit about bench press. I think for weightlifting, it's not really relevant, but I think this idea of trying to kind of ride the logic train of here's a problem, how do we get to a solution? I think that's
Right.
incredibly helpful. So, Tiff, you said her bench press was kind of struggling. How do you conceptualize correcting an issue that you've noticed after a competition? So, after the performance is done, this is the result. How do we fix that for the next time we compete?
I So I think the key is like identifying what's going on first, right? Like I think it's so easy and a lot of times we just get focused on this. And a lot of people fall into this category. So many athletes have done this. They'll say, "I'm not doing this thing right. What do I do to fix it?" And sometimes it's like, "Hey, you're just not keeping the bar close to your body, or you're just not tight when you set up, or you're doing this thing wrong and you're doing a sloppy job of it." Like there's just a bit of like you gotta get your shit together a little and like try your hardest. Um, that doesn't mean that that's the solution to every problem, but I do think that's the first thing. Let's go back to training. Are you really doing a good job? Like what are the checklist, right? Are you pausing every first rep of every set? Are you setting up the same way? Are you, just doing the thing right? Then I would say, okay, let's look at like, are we just trying to do the technique incorrectly? Like, because, in Tiff's case, I think she makes some errors in the bench where she tries to push the bar towards her feet too much.
Hmm.
And that just gets her into a really bad position. She can't press. I've had her work a lot more on flaring her elbows much earlier,
Hmm.
and you can see a noticeable improvement in the
Oh
bar
wow.
path and the lift is better. It comes back over her face quicker and she's able to press it. She has a big arch and really wide grip. So like you kind of have to get yourself into that position where right away you're moving this way and she can get her shoulders in, right? Um, every time she tries to push towards her feet, it's like turning into this weird delt decline press almost, which is just not going to work. So first, obviously after meet, let's look at our technique. Is there something you're just doing wrong? Let's revamp it, set up, start, actual movements, all that. Then I would say, what can we do to support that if we do find a problem? So it's like, what exercises are going to help that? I found with Tiff that like pin presses, but from a couple of inches off her chest made a
Hmm.
difference because it's like you're almost right at that position. It gives her the ability to sort of fight with that initial like pressing it from a little bit compromised position, but also it's kind of right in that area that she's going to struggle. I don't think that's necessarily the reason why they help her a lot, but I do think that pin presses have made a difference. And then the other thing is like looking at what just general stuff can we do, right? Getting your triceps and pecs stronger is going to help. So, more close grip work and whatnot. But like a lot of it is, did you just fuck it up? Are you doing the technique right? Can we revamp that? And then let's find some movements that help. Lean on general stuff, always with the understanding that, like, especially for powerlifting, like, you know, hypertrophy and force production are going to take you a really long way, even if you're, super fucked up. So don't like neglect all that and try to like tear it all down and rebuild it from, the empty bar. That's my take.
No, and that's actually something that I've adjusted in my coaching practice. Is I
Uh,
think in weightlifting you get so I get so hyper fixated on technique, and it's like,
yeah,
this is really bad. Let's do everything we can to make it as efficient as possible. And when you do that, what you're basically doing is, how do we constrain the movement or take weight off to make the movement more right? And then you just completely bypass load, and you say like, oh, we're not gonna really focus on that because we need to square away your movement. And you lose that ability to lean into what you're really good at, put a ton of weight on the bar, and just get comfortable with heavier
yeah,
lifts. And there's a time and place for everything, but I think doing that, getting away from load for too long, too frequently, I just seen people get out of practice. So they look great, they look phenomenal to 90%, and then things just kind of fall apart. And it's like, it's basically a tale of two techniques. So the way I've kind of thought about that now is, after a meet, we're not gonna really back off and do what we're really bad at. We're gonna do a little bit more what we're really good at, and then some of what we're really bad at, and we're gonna try and bridge the two. So I think that's been a really important change. And that's something I've just learned by having multiple people show up at a meet and just be out of practice with high percentage weights. And that's not fun to watch, where it's like, you look so good, and then you watch them take their last warm up and you think,
it
oh, but
happens.
you don't look good with that weight.
Yeah. That's also consequently not the thing you want to tell your athlete when they take that lift, that last warm up. You looked great until that one. Um, but yeah, I agree 100% with all that. Like, for sure, it's weight. I think we have a unique scenario because I don't know other coaches that are coaching athletes at the same levels in both sports. Like
Yep.
people that are, Shania just won Pan Am, Commonwealth champs, I think. Um, like people at international level in weightlifting and national or international in
Tiff just won a
powerlifting.
pro card in
Yeah, and
powerlifting.
Tiff won a pro
Yep.
card and weight in powerlifting. Like, but both of us have a lot of depth of experience
Yep.
in both sports, so we have a good perspective. I always feel like it benefits us because you can look at powerlifting from the perspective of weightlifting and be like, yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff you can focus on. You could look at weightlifting from the perspective of powerlifting and say, you
Mm,
know, okay, there's a lot of stuff here that we could fix programming wise, right?
yep.
And like I feel like we have a unique perspective in that. The downside to it sometimes is that we can draw too much from either or, and
Yep.
kind of like, I will say weightlifting and weightlifting coaching feels more like cooking a steak than it does baking a cake, right? Where you're like, hey, I'm just gonna kind of wing it today and kind of push them and this and that, because there's a lot of forgiving.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, the nature of weightlifting is more forgiving, right? Um, that doesn't work in powerlifting. You can't go into it and be like, we'll just kind of go heavy on Friday. Um, like, you kind of plan it out. It's regimented. You've got it really dialed in, and you kind of stick to that, and it works way better. So yeah, I will say I think our perspectives help a lot because we can also, contrast it. Like, what would I do in weightlifting after a meet? How would I address this? Right?
Yeah, I love that analogy, because I don't know exactly how you meant it, but with a steak, you have
Yeah.
direct control of the temp. with the oven, it's like, oh, it's at 325. I have to let it roll.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what is
totally.
happening to that freaking cake. It's
Hmm.
gonna roll until it's done. I'm gonna pull it out and just be like, I fucked up. With a
Yeah,
steak, it's like mess with the temp, take it off the heat,
yeah,
flip it, fats in the pan,
yep,
seasonings, whatever you need to do. Oh, well, let's make a sauce because we fucked it up. Let's
yeah,
drown out some of the salt, right?
yep,
So there's a lot more fluidity and flexibility, which
yeah,
I like. I find that
yeah,
fun. One thing that's been thrown into the wrench, which is interesting, and it's kind of made me take a step back to think, I kind of think about like the quality of coach I am. Is we did start a weightlifting club at the high school, and I have a girl who's a soccer player. She's overseeing that, and we had 4 kids in there, and we were doing some snatches, some clean and jerks, and I was teaching them. I'm like, man, it's actually kind of a challenge to just teach a kid who's 14, 15. they they're really not in their body, and what I mean by that
yeah,
is they're just so unconscious when they're lifting. They
yeah,
just do a lift, and like that's that's what they intended to do. There's no
yeah,
thought. And then the coaching is like it's a really transparent process of I'm giving you coaching information or feedback, and I can see exactly how it's taken up. There's no, oh, I need to think about it. I need to try and process. I'll feel things out. It's like, no, whatever you're saying and whatever is happening, that's the process. That's A to B. That black box is giving you the exact outcome that, the quality of your coaching is warranting. So I really have enjoyed this kind of like blend of high level powerlifting, high level weightlifting, and then just like really kind of in the trenches, low level, introductory, all of it.
yeah.
Um, which I think is great because, kind of to your point, that's why the app is so comprehensive and so incredibly well developed. Is it comes from that perspective of a lot of flexibility, a lot of fluidity, but every single tool you need to do the exact job that you need to do.
Yeah, I think one of the big things with the app for me, and I imagine for you, is like I want to make sure that we integrate like the actual culture of coaching into a product,
Yep.
because I feel like a lot of stuff out there, even like people talk about spreadsheets being amazing, but when you watch them use them, and a lot of times it's nothing, they're not doing things amazing. There's nothing special about the spreadsheet. It's just, maybe it's really elaborate and it calculates a lot of numbers, but it's not doing anything. It's just a very elaborate, it's a spreadsheet. Where what I want to do is really give people the ability to feel like the data is useful to them. So there's a lot of stuff we can collect, and right now, any app, any spreadsheet, anything you do, a user has no incentive to actually put any information in, right? If you never got a bit of feedback on a video, why would you send a video, right? Or if your coach never said anything or never changed the program, you wouldn't need to write anything down in a training journal, because what would I
Mm,
change? But when you actually can do that, when any coach will have the ability to look at the data, draw conclusions, ask questions about it, and then do something with it, that's when it becomes useful. And then I hope that we can sort of inspire a lot of people to start being a bit more data focused in their coaching, which is really just to say, like, looking at what's happened and looking at what you're trying to do and then making decisions that way, rather than just kind of like thinking like, oh, we did this, we hit a heavy one last Friday, we're going to max out, so this week we'll do the same. It's like, maybe take a little deeper look at it.
mhm,
And then the other thing I really am excited about is like the the like ability to build something that's exactly what we want.
mm,
So we're working on this like long-term planner. So you'll have like a 12-month long calendar you can look at that'll have all kinds of functionality and capability to, like, you can just look at a glance on one page and see volume, intensity. You can look at any movement group, any movement in your program. So once you write it, you have this like long-term calendar you can see stuff on. And that to me is where I feel like a lot of stuff that I know to do, I didn't do well.
mm.
I wasn't like writing a long-term 6 week long, or no, sorry, so 16-week programs, building the phases, building the blocks. Because a lot of times you just like, you don't know, somebody's going to train for one meet and then they're gone. So you don't put that effort in. But now it should be a lot easier. So it's like everybody can get a way better spectrum of what we know as coaches.
Yeah, that's actually a hard part of coaching to wrestle with, is that cynicism that develops
Yeah.
after,
Yeah.
why we had this great progression, we had this great program, and then something happened. Now it's like 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, what am I doing with that time?
Uh-huh.
That the time I put into it is now just completely wasted. So it's definitely a fine balance, which I think if you have a system that allows for that to be done efficiently and faster, not poorly,
Yes.
faster, then
Yes.
you can do it and probably have less guilt associated with, well, I kind of had this long-term plan and we have to deviate from it. It's not that it was bad. It's just like, okay, now we have to make an adjustment and we can pivot. And that pivot's much more comfortable if it's like, yeah, I just had like 30, 45, 60 minutes mocking up something. It's not a huge waste. So I think that's critical to have a good system that allows you to do that.
Yep. Yep.
One thing we did want to talk about, and before we get into the like chat GPT for set rep construction, Seb and I have been on this like weight loss challenge, and we've been the Weightlifting House podcast is going to go up at some point, but basically what we're doing is trying to lose about a pound a week, and we're going to do that for like 10 weeks, get down to like 84 kilos, and we're not doing it as a competition. We're doing it in collaboration as kind of a means of like keeping each
Nice.
other engaged and
Little
interested. And
support.
yeah, and it's been one of the best things for me in terms of the quality of my nutrition has gone up tremendously. Consume more
Nice.
fiber, more fruits, more vegetables, more protein, more normal meals, more normal like days of eating.
Have you cut down on the pepperoni rolls, or is that
I've actually
or
doubled the intake because it's the
they
paradox of
fit the
weight loss.
macros so perfectly I can't avoid them. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's the golden ratio, or should I say it's the I don't even know. I was gonna say the pepperoni. I don't know. But Max, I
Amazing.
bring that up because you're looking svelte. You have a collared shirt on for people who aren't watching this.
Yep.
Your hair looks like it's been cut somewhat recently.
Yeah.
You've trimmed your facial hair. It looks well groomed.
Got to
What's
look the
going on?
part. I'm just trying to get in better shape. You know, I looked at myself one day. I woke up, pulled the gun out of my mouth, and I said, "You know what? You don't eat this 9 millimeter today." Um, but no, yeah, I just same thing. Like, I think you get to a certain point where you're just like everybody has to start. You take care of yourself more. So,
Yeah,
trying to similar. I want to get down to. I want to get leaner, and I don't really care exactly how much I weigh as long as I can get close to a point where my plan is by the time I'm like 43 or something, I want to get under a 30 BMI, and stay down there the rest of my life because it's just like, at some point you have to start thinking about your heart and health and whatnot. So yeah.
yeah. Well, I think, and I there's actually a great paper I referenced that. Yeah, I'm not an expert. I read it. It was great. I had some really positive takeaways from it, but it's something about obesity and the burden of responsibility. And I think for myself, like I'm really grateful that I can lose weight really easily. I can keep it off really easily, so I can kind of maintain like gold standard of health for
Yeah.
me. So kind of to your point, it's like if it's something that's within your control and you can manage it really well, I feel
Totally.
like that's something you should take pride in. I don't like
Yeah.
do take control of. So I think that's awesome, and you can kind of join Seb and I and join this little challenge. If anyone else is interested, I think we said this in the Weightlifting House podcast. Tag us in your pictures, tag us in your posts.
Nice.
Um, Leave some feedback or comments on this episode, and just get the conversation rolling. Yeah,
Yeah.
anybody and
I like
everybody.
it. Yeah, for sure. I think for me it's like also a thing of like it's a challenge that's enjoyable because at the end of it you build on something, you look good, you feel good. Like being super strong again is just not, like what I would have to do to squat 300 kilos again just doesn't sound like, I just don't want to do that. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in that. um but like, getting this challenge. Also, it's cool. I didn't know you guys were doing it until you just told me today. But I'm totally on board. I think we should all, like, when we meet up next year, we should all have a little pose off.
We can
Strip
we
down,
can
boys. Strip down. Let's flex our muscles. No one will be there. It'll be no cameras, but we'll watch each other. The dark dungeons of the Weightlifting House warehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The parts of it they don't want you don't want you to know about.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's gonna be a ton of fun. So I think that's a great time talking about just like doing something challenging, doing something sequential, something that's phasic, seeing results. There's a new feature that I actually just used for the first time today.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I used it for the first time. I think you sent me a video of it.
Yeah.
And I was
So
like, oh, that's really cool. I went in to I wrote all my programs today. And I played around with it a little bit and tried to get a feel for it. I didn't spend a ton of time
yeah,
because I think I
yeah,
need to get it into my flow. But it's this really cool feature where basically you type in some sort of prompt or command, and then the app will spit out the workout that you typed in. So maybe you can explain it a little more
yeah.
clearly.
So the way we've designed the way we've designed our platform is that we have um, we have logic, right? So we have business logic and we have training logic, whatever it is. We have a functional app that can do a lot of things. And what most people will do is the opposite of this. They'll take like Chat GPT or a large language model, and then what's called wrapping it. So they'll put a wrapper around it, and they'll basically be like, "Hey, we have a program builder," and all they're going to do is write this elaborate prompt, which is what you write into like a language model like Chat GPT, and it spits out something, and then they display that. But really, the core technology inside of that product is just you know OpenAI or Llama or whatever, right? Um, Ours is different in that we have all of the functional machinery. We use an LLM, like in this case, we're using OpenAI's models, and we have built a platform where you can create a prompt, write a prompt, and we ask the model, and the model spits out, information that then the app uses. So it's the same thing. It's like instead of you clicking every button and making the cells do something, the language model is controlling the app now, or really it's giving a like a JSON file to the app, and then it builds what it wants or what you told it. What this allows us to do is one, it doesn't matter what happens to any AI model that comes out. The better they get, the faster, the better we get, right? So we don't have this thing that's built around one piece of technology, and if it changes in a way and it doesn't work for us, we're screwed. We can, plug and play any model with one line change. What this does is apps like TrueCoach, spreadsheets, anyone that's used CoachLogik, there's like, in order to track data, you need finite details. You need to know the reps, the target RPE, the percentage, the load, the rating of that set. So you have a few cells that you need to populate, and that's awesome. The downside, and what something like TrueCoach or these other products do well, is you just write text and say, hey, do 5x5 at 80% today. The downside is you can't collect any data from that. It's just a string of text. And so we designed it in a way where we can collect all this data, but it's still a little bit cumbersome. So we're using a language model where you have a box, a prompt, and you can tell it, do 5x3 at 80%. And it will spit that out, and it will generate that for you and populate the cells accordingly. And then your workout's done, right? So you can write these training sessions, these exercises and sets and reps really quickly. Again, it's in very much a beta state right now, but it's improving super rapidly. We can do lots of things and improve it very, very quickly because it's all text based for us too. It's all prompt based. So what you get is the ability now to just use text to build a session. So you can say, hey, I sent you an example of one, which was like,
Yeah.
based off of the way like Jake from Data Driven Strength builds like power building programs, where I said, work up to a single at RPE 7, then back off, 3 RPE and do 3x3, then back off and do, 4x8 at RPE 8 to 9 or something. And you can just copy that, paste it in there, and it builds the whole thing. And you get all these sets populated the way you want. The ability to modify those as well. This is still a little buggy now, but I've used it where what we'll do is we pass through what's already happened. So if you had a session in there, you copy last week's over, you put it in, and you just will be able to write add 2 kilos to every set, and it's done. Every set gets bumped up 2 kilos. Or you can say, delete set 3 and add a fifth set and whatever. So basically, imagine anything you can write, it'll understand, it can spit out a file that the system can use and then build the sets you want, sets and reps. The cool thing about this is that what we get from here not only is just more efficiency and faster, your whole interface with the product will become more and more text based, and then eventually
Mm.
could become voice, just voice based, where you could just talk to it and say, hey, you know, give me 4 sets of 4 back squat at 80%. If you want to do the Jarvis thing, sit in your apartment at night. But yeah, the goal here is that what we'll do is learn. So the things you put into your system, into your coaching platform, the sets and reps you use most often will become prompts that are pre-populated, little buttons. So if you're constantly putting in 5x2 at 80% for snatches, that'll start to come up more often. So it's even faster. You'll just write snatch and then hit the button 5x2 at 80%. Next week, you just bump it up 2 kilos. Um, the reason for this is really just to make your job more efficient and more enjoyable.
Mm.
I've played with it, and even though it's buggy and it will do shit I get frustrated with, because I know there's things we didn't uh, update yet, I still want to use it.
Mm.
And to me, it's like one of those things where it's like, this is really enjoyable because it can be really quick. I can tell it to do stuff and it builds it. And I feel like this is great because now I get the best of both worlds. I can just do a text-based sort of build stuff out, and it understands it and it can populate that workout. Eventually you'll get better and better and better, where it goes to the point of like, you can just tell it like, work up to a heavy single over 5 sets. And it
Mm.
should figure out like what that's going to look like percentage wise and these things. So I'm excited. Um, it also does. We've also built. I don't think we disabled this, but it also writes a little like um, instructions for how to do the workout. So you'll do like 5x3 to 80%, and we can make it do whatever we want. Like tell you how to warm up. Hey,
Oh, that's
warm up
awesome.
this way, this way. Here's a primer movement for snatch that you've used before. Do you want to include that in your warm up? Like we can do basically anything with it because our system is totally designed in a way where it's very easy for us to iterate and do things like this. I think I think it's one of those features where it's like, it seems kind of like under the radar, but suddenly you use it and you're like, this is fucking cool. And like, this is going to make my life way easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned earlier, I think we've had a handful of phone calls recently, and I've been taking a class called neuromechanics, and I mentioned that to you and talked about how we're using MATLAB and learning a bit of I'm learning what any
Yeah.
of the I'm learning what all this stuff is, because it's my first exposure to all that stuff and hearing people talk about it. I haven't mentioned this on the podcast, but basically I'm in this class with 3 guys who are they're all getting their PhDs in computer science. The professor, he is in the exercise physiology department and in the mechanical aerospace engineering department. He's like a genius, super sharp guy,
Yeah.
and basically what we do is he introduces a model of a physiological thing, so like walking, muscle,
Yeah.
sensory feedback, and then we try to take some of that as it's put into code and then run simulations. So I'm learning all this stuff for the first time, and I'm talking to Max, and I'm like, holy cow, this stuff is really powerful,
Yeah.
really, really powerful. And I hear what they talk about. I see what they're doing. We know what's kind of going on in the tech space, and I'm like, okay, so basically Max and Kush are the first people to bring that into
Yeah.
weightlifting, powerlifting, and strength sports. I don't think people understand how powerful it's going to be. And I think really it's just like, it's not even that it's scratching the surface. It hasn't even touched the surface yet.
Yeah.
Like,
It's,
that's how powerful.
yeah, to me, it's this thing of like, we built our whole thing. It took way longer than we wanted, way longer to build all this. But I'm so glad we built it the way we did, because Kush has built a an architecture that's rock solid, that's going to work and be incredibly extensible. So our ability to make adjustments and changes, like he just built like a little admin panel. So I go into the workout summary that gets generated and I can just keep rewriting the prompt to get what I want out of it.
Hmm.
So right now we spit out like basically like you do a back squat workout and it will spit out something that'll say like this was your average weight for the session. You overshot the RPE on set 1 and 4 and undershot it on set 2 and 5, and a quick little summary basically saying whatever. That seems benign and like that's a nice thing to have a little like, hey, little brief summary. Your client will get a summary every day, so they should never feel like they're left hanging if you miss a few
Hmm.
days of feedback. There's always information from the app. But at this level, it's neat. But what you can get to is a point where the system will understand, like, we'll be able to give it this sort of capacity to, like, what did you do the last 3 weeks for these squat workouts? How does this squat workout compare to the last 3 or 4 sessions or 5 sessions? Right? Are you actually on target to make progress? Are you not? Are you,
Hmm.
where are you in that vein relative to your own history, but also relative to everybody's history? And so what we're going to get to is a point where the more data we get from people, our the better information we'll be able to give coaches. And I used to think chatbots were kind of silly. Like I didn't really like the idea of a chatbot in our product. But what we're going to do with ours, I just love talking about it. But what we're going to do is it's going to exist basically as like a co-pilot that sits on your desktop on your site
Hmm.
all the time. So if you're on your client's page, if I'm on Josh's page, I can open the chat bot and I can ask it something like, what was the average weight of the snatches for this week? You know, and it should tell me that. These are easy queries to do in our database. So it's like we'll get more and more of this ability where you can go and coach people and do it like a coach would do in real life. You're not looking at spreadsheets. You can just ask it, hey, what were the last 3 heaviest sets of 5 Josh did in the back squat?
Hmm.
And I'll be able to query that information. And that gives you the ability to then quickly assess like, hey, where are they at? What are they doing? What are their PRs? Deliver way better programs, way better programming. And then also stay engaged as a coach because you have this problem solving thing now in front of you that you can do cool stuff with.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm super excited to keep using
Yeah.
it, and I realize now this, it's easy to get carried away with this stuff because it's so cool, it's so high tech. I think the most awesome thing is one, people can go to app.coachlogic.com and start right now. Literally, like
Yeah.
you're listening to this, like
It's free.
press
Get on there.
press pause, leave us a review first.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 stars, just a glowing endorsement. I'll read it on the next podcast. And then go to app.coachlogic.com, sign up for the beta version, get all of your athletes on there, and just start playing around with it.
Yeah.
And it's free, right?
Yeah.
It's no hit to your bank account. Uh,
Absolutely. Love
and
it.
then to transition slightly, we were both guests on the Roadie Strength
Oh, yeah.
podcast, which was an awesome show. They had really, really interesting, great questions. One was, if you're driving down a local highway and you see a billboard, what would it say? What would you put up? I want to do a similar kind of lightning question, but it would be, let's do exercise and what's a good one? Let's do exercise. What's an exercise you've been using a lot recently that you found to be really effective for, say, a majority of people? You just started including it because you're like, oh yeah, this is really, really potent.
Uh, so I'll actually go a little off my normal wheelhouse. Exercises I've been using a lot for myself and
Ooh,
kind of for me and I Kush does what I do, right? So he just does we write our program. Uh, I've been doing a lot of rear delt and delt work
okay.
because I always wanted to have my shoulders more broad, right? I always liked the idea of like working my shoulders a lot. And I always was like, you do a lot of like medial delt exercises, and I found that didn't really make my shoulders bigger. And now what I've been doing is a lot of like weird, sort of like, not to say weird, but like side lying
Mm,
dumbbell delt exercises. Like anything I can do to get the greatest. like stretch mediated hypertrophy effect. So, really deep stretch, but like, bent over on thy side, like rear delt stuff. And like I've noticed that has made the whole rear delt trap so much more, like I'm able to target it so much better. Um, so I've really enjoyed that. Like I've really enjoyed more of these, like, I would say esoteric bodybuilding, like hyper isolation movements. Um, and I don't know what it is, but it's like it feels so good to like your upper back and delt feel strong, like, and big. It's just like, yeah, I've been enjoying that a lot.
Okay, I like that a lot. One that I think Seb and I have talked about is when you get, so if you have a cable machine, you kind of put your
Yeah,
hand behind your back, grab the cable,
totally.
and then walk away from it as far as you can,
Yeah.
get that arm pulled back,
Yep.
and it just puts so much tension in such a stretched position. It feels awesome.
And you're
Um,
doing it like a rear delt.
you do like a lateral raise, like behind the back,
Oh yeah.
really
Okay.
kind of get stretched,
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
pull out. Just get big
Yeah.
range of motion,
Totally. Yeah.
as stretched as you can. Seb was saying that he's been doing them kind of like you said, like lying on your
Yep.
side and doing lateral raises that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing that a lot. I've been doing another one too where I'll like lay on a bench, like chest supported.
Yeah.
And then the thing I don't like about this is I can't get quite as good a stretch, but basically it's almost like a straight arm lat pull down, but it's like all rear delt.
Okay.
Um, and that's been really cool. Like that's worked super well. But yeah, it's like they're not quite as much a stretch as like side lying or something. But
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay. Those are awesome. I always love kind of
yeah,
nerding out on exercise selection for
totally.
hypertrophy. Always super fun. I'm gonna say one exercise I found to kind of be uniformly effective is going to be the zombie squat, which is just the
Oh yeah.
arms out front squat, and that's for people who don't pattern the squat well, which would be beginners, people who are really bouncy and springy but kind of can't control that bounce out of the bottom. So I love that. I'll use, and the thing I like about understanding programming is I can use it in so many different uh, iterations. So I've kind of been setting up for a few people. They'll go in, maybe have a top set of the back squat, back offs on the front squat. But instead of back offs on the front squat, we'll do top set of back squat and then zombie squats for the down sets. That's been great. And then I've also used that. I've been using that with a kid I've been coaching, Cam, who I coached when I was at Clintonville, and then he took some time off, reconnected recently, called wanted to catch up, wanted to start training again, and he just PR'd his front squat, did 150, 157, 158 uh, as a zombie squat. His best front squat prior to that was 155. So all time PR front squat, no rack, right?
Nice.
Yeah, so he's getting freaky strong. I love that. If you're listening and you haven't done it, I would try it out for a block, and your legs are gonna feel awesome. Your
Yep.
upper back's gonna feel super strong. Um, so
It's a
I
good one.
highly
I like
recommend it.
that.
Highly
Yeah.
recommend it. Yeah. And then Max, let's do this. What's another good lightning round question? Oh, on the spot during a podcast. Any good songs you've been listening to lately? Any good music?
Oh man. So I've been listening to, and this comes from my stepson. He just got into Pantera,
Oh,
which is kind
awesome.
of cool
Okay.
because he
Yeah.
he wasn't into it, and his mom never really listened to Pantera. Um, and it was cool because he was telling me a story about something he discovered, which was neat, which was apparently there was an event, a concert when Pantera was still kind of unknown in Europe, I guess. It was like in Germany. And maybe this is they were more well known, but like this is, you imagine, like early 90s, right?
Mm,
And they showed up and they didn't headline, they opened for Metallica and AC/DC.
wow.
And we were talking about like how insane that must have been and how shitty that must have been for Metallica and AC/DC to have Pantera show up. And like they probably knew them, everyone knows them, but like it wasn't like they were as big. and you're in the audience and this band comes out and plays their set, it had to have been the biggest, like, holy shit, that band was the heaviest thing I've ever heard, going into these other two bands where you're like, and I think it was like Metallica was playing their, oh, it was like their more rock, that kind of rock album they had that was pretty bad. I can't remember. Not, but like, yeah, it was like, so it was cool. He was telling me the whole story, and I'm like, that's awesome that he could like learn that. And so, yeah, I was like, that'd be pretty sweet. That'd have been a concert that would have been awesome to go to.
Yeah,
But so I've been listening to them a little bit more.
that's really cool. I'd say I went to a concert recently and I saw three of my favorite bands. So I've been listening to a lot of a band called Windwalkers, and they actually have a song called Dead Talk. Freaking awesome.
Nice.
So good. One of the best vocalists live. Actually, it was such a good set. I walked up, so I kind of maneuvered myself to the stage as they were breaking everything down, and someone's like, "Hey, you're not gonna stay here, are you?" I was like, "No, I'm just trying to shake his hand." And then I kind of gestured to the lead singer. I shake his hand, and I'm like, "That's the best set I've ever seen." He's like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. That means so
That's
much."
cool.
Yeah, it
That's
was like a really awesome moment. It was like the most energy and just like coolest experience I've had at a concert. So,
that's
if
awesome, dude.
anyone listening likes live music, you have to go to a show, check it out, just kind of let go of all your inhibitions. I was completely sober and I did that, and it was a ton of fun. Um, so yeah, I'd highly recommend it. Max, it was
Yeah.
great to get back on the podcast and catch back up and to get people up to speed with the platform as it's literally being developed and people are able to get on it. It was also really cool to chat programming and then to kind of finish off with a few not so rapid fire questions.
Anytime. I love it.
Any final words before we pop off?
Not much. Yeah. Just check it out. app.coachlogic.com. Get in there. Let us know what you think. Once you get on, just DM me or send a message and we'll get you the Discord link and you can give us feedback.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing for the podcast. If everyone listening has feedback, you have an endorsement, you have something you want to tell us, like do not hesitate to drop us a message, leave a comment on Spotify, leave a comment on Spreaker, just send us some sort of feedback. We'll read it on the next podcast. We'll give you a shout out. All of that is greatly appreciated. And then we both work for Team Ada, so I think it'd be kind of like a
Yeah.
conflict of interest for me to give my coaching information or for you to give yours. So I'll just say if anybody wants coaching, reach out. You can reach out to Max. You can reach out to myself. You can get housed under the Team Ada name and then
Yeah.
lift and compete alongside Shania, Commonwealth champion, Danny Myers, Glenn, just one of the best in the U.S. Tiffany Leung, one of the best in the U.S. And then Jordan Brown, one of the best weightlifters in Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
you'd be in good company. This was a fantastic episode of the podcast. I'm really excited to get these rolling again. Look forward to this series with Max and I, and we will catch you all next week on another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast.